Government scholar. Government scholar Norwegian statsstipendiat is a position awarded by the Parliament of Norway upon the recommendation of the Ministry of Culture and the Ministry of Education and Research and funded directly over the state budget of Norway. The position can be for life until the normal age of retirement, 67 years, or for a limited period of time, although modern appointments usually are for life. The scholarships are awarded to a select number of persons whose work is deemed important for the society, and who may engage in research, culture, or other societal areas. As of 2011, there were 30 government scholars in Norway, 23 men and 7 women. All appointees were included in the Norwegian State Calendar until it ceased publication in 2012. List of government scholars. The following is a comprehensive list of all government scholars, with the year of appointment. Appointed 2010 present. Caroline Frogner, filmmaker 2014. Mary Boyne, musician 2012. Edvard Holm, novelist 2012. Anne Emerson-Boe, textile artist 2012. Kirsten Breitenberg, folk musician 2011. Per Hav, historian 2011. The 11. Elias Axelsen, singer 2010. Lars Borgersrud, historian 2010. Appointed 2000-2009. Thorberg, botanist 2009. Helgard Mutt, literature scholar and philosopher 2009. Torbaum Larsen, author 2009. Petter Ringen Johannessen, historian 2008. Wench Blomberg, criminologist 2008. Hans Christian Buckholm, film and cultural conservation worker 2008. Jan Knutson, documentary filmmaker and film historian 2008. Walid El-Kubasi, author, translator and writer 2007. Morten Wessel Krogstad, cultural conservation worker 2007 and 7. Britt Karin Larsen, author 2006. Torm Rogdeberg, cultural conservation worker 2006. Eugene Skelgen, author, PN activist 2006. Bjorn Stendal, jazz historian 2006. Ragnar Andersen, theologian 2005. Aj Håkon, Catholic priest and author 2005. H. Havik, hymn book editor leave from the scheme 2005. Amy Lightfoot, cultural conservationist 2005. Arild Stubhog, author and biographer 2005. Øystein Rotham, author and literature critic 2004. Per Arndal, priest and author 2004. Tormod Hagen, children's book author 2004. Marion Hesk, visual artist 2004. Nina Karin Monson, philosopher and author 2004. Thorvald Steen, author 2004. Eystein Eggen, author 2003. Egil Kapsted, jazz musician 2003. Els Ronevig, building protection enthusiast 2003. Solveig Boll, journalist 2002. Toran Ustaz, author 2002. Sverre Odgaard, museum worker from Røros 2002. John Foss, author and playwright 2001. Else Britt Nilsson, theologian and prior in the Dominican Order 2001. Appointed 1990-1999. Sigmund Kavaloy Setreng, eco-philosopher and farmer 1999. Sander Bratland, folk singer and pedagogue 1997. Lars Roar Langslet, historian of ideas, writer 1997. Johannes Berg, jazz historian 1996. Valerij Burkov, Russian philologist 1996. Sverre Dahl, translator 1996. Ura Seither, author 1996. Turid Farbregd, university lecturer, translator and philologist 1995. Jiri H. Linka, pianist 1995. Axel Jensen, author 1995. Jorund Gaisma, mathematician and athlete, Paralympics 1994. Egil Sinding Larsen, architectural historian 1994. Niels Axel Mjas, theologian 1994. Arvid Hansen, author 1993. Sidsel Mork, author 1993. Mikkel Oheim, promoter of the Lule Sami language 1993. Hans Christian Eriksen, author 1992. Helge Ergens Hoag, Pollinatiker, BLAA. Innen Archaeology 1992. Dag Skogheim, author and culture historian 1992. Judith Vogt, Danish-Norwegian professor of history of ideas 1992. Jan Erik Vold, author and critic 1992. Elizabeth Assen, author, historian 1992. Holvard T. Bjorgum, folk musician 1991. Frank Björkholt, foreign correspondent 1990. Dagny Groven Mihran, professor of literature, folk singer 1990. Kjell Risvik, translator 1990. Frode J. Stromnys, professor of psychology 1990. Appointed 1980-1989. Nutbuen, folk musician, folk art communicator 1989. Olav Albert Christopherson, biologist, epidemiologist 1989. Ivar Skelland, writer and columnist 1989. Brynjolf Foss, paper and papyrus conservator 1989. Karen Christine Friel, author and gay rights activist 1989. Sven Nijhuis, folk musician, professor 1989. Finn Sali, security policy researcher 1989. Kjær Svebak, theologian, North Norwegian church historian 1989. Knut Odgaard, author 1989. Eric Damon, author and environmental activist 1988. Ivar Jacks, visual artist 1988. Alexander Kan, philologist 1988. Kjell Beekelund, musician 1987. Odd Item, author 1987. K7. Pal Haugen, art historian 1987. Hans Lind Jolin, Sami historian 1987. Martin Nag, writer, literature historian 1987. Ornolf Hodney, folklore researcher 1986. Georg Johannessen, author, professor 1986. Lillemer Johnson, respiratory therapist 1986. Øystein Parman, author and publisher 1986. Bjorn Stable, psychologist 1986. Ulf Stable, psychologist 1986. Kid Anderson, journalist, writer 1985. Frederick Barth, social anthropologist 1985. Niels Ellingsgaard, cultural conservationist and facilitator in Norwegian rose painting 1985. Helge Hognestad, theologian 1985. Liv Domersnes, actor 1984. Thor Heyerdahl, traveler, amateur archaeologist, and ethnographer 1984. Age Ronning, author 1984. Olav Aspelund, civil engineer 1983. Mens Schulrud, author, theater director, and columnist 1983. Kjell Artun, linguist 1983. John Brandrud, philologist, university librarian 1982. Kari Elizabeth Borreson, historian of ideas, historian of women's theology 1982. Odd Salyum Smone, literary critic 1982. Ada Pollack, art historian 1981. Odd Bakarud, folk musician 1980. Odd Brochman, architect, professor 1980. Year 1980. Year 1980. Year 1980. Year 1980. Katie. Kesser 1980. Esser 1980. Esser 1980. 1980. Ivar Orglind, lyricist and translator 1980. Peter 1980. He 1980. Peter 1980. 1980. 1980. 1980. 80. 1880. Arnulf Sudman, editor of the Norsk Allkundebok and Language Bureaucrat 1980. Appointed 1970-1979. Otto Blair, folklorist 1978. Havard Groot Forfang, teacher 1978. Peter Wesselsap, philosopher 1978. Niels Hallen, historian 1977. Philip Hume, literature historian 1977. And Stein Ingstad, archaeologist 1977. Per Bjornstad, mathematician 1976. Svein Ellingsen, hymn writer 1976. Tons Seiervag, school leader 1976. Arne Dorumskard, lyricist and translator 1975. Olav Flo, bibliographer 1975. Hartvig W. Danevig, maritime historian 1974. Edvard Rod, author and folklorist 1974. Hans J. Henriksen, Sami consultant 1973. Gabriel Oidny, geographer 1973. Henning Gran, art historian 1972. Els Christi Kieland, painter 1972. Ragnar Ulstein, historian 1972-22. Finn Carling, author 1971. Melada Bleckestad, literature historian 1970. Helge Stad, author and adventurer 1970. Appointed 1950-1969. Sverre Hartmann, historian 1968. Otto Christian Dahl, missionary historian 1967. Leif Jarman Wilhelmsen, bureaucrat 1967, C7. H. O. Christopherson, historian 1965. Nick Stang, art historian 1964, or Jeremy M. F. Wasiutinski, astronomer 1964. Ingvar Hodge, author 1963. Trygve Mathisen, forsker innen sikkerhetspolitikk 1963. Olav Dalgard, art and literature historian 1961. Ascout Steins, Riksarkivar 1961. Per Foxted Skolman, Samisk Sprakfortjemper 1960. Arne Odd Johnson, historian 1958. Nils A. Itreberg, historian 1958. Hans Henrik Holm, lyriker 1957. Lars Rientan, ethnologue 1957. Christian Kildal, painter 1956. Axel Otto Norman, Abbesman Titersjeff 1955. Sigmund Torsteinsen, bevarer of Troldhagen 1955. Nut Hermanstad, Folkehøgskole teacher, folklorist 1954. Ingi Kraken, author 1954. Sverre Steen, historian 1954. Herman Leopoldus Loveskjold, heraldic artist 1952. Magnus B. Olsen, Navnegransker 1952. Ingebrigt Christopher Grandal, literature historian 1950. Erling Johansson, Selvlært arkeolog 1950. Reidar Oxnevad, journalist, bibliograph 1950. Appointed 1920-1949. Wilhelm Bjørknes, meteorologist 1949. Arne Bjørndal, folkemusiksamler 1949. Rolf Fessen, literature historian 1949. Rolf Loch, historian and Wergeland biographer 1947. Bjarne Agard, historian 1941. Bernhard Ferovik, Kiss historian 1938. Ingjald Nissen, philosopher and psychologue 1938. Olav Sands, local historian MM 1934. Eider Handegard, physician, botanist, Avhold Sagitator 1932. Karsten E. Borchgrevink, Antarctispherer and historian 1929. Ivar Mortensen Ignund, theologian, author 1929. Frederik Mackedy Lund, historian 1929. Otto Sverdrup, Paul Ferrer, Som National Gave 1926. Alexander Sapel, Bible translator 1923. Axel Drolsum, librarian 1922. Albert Kajer, Stedsnamgransker 1922. Matti Agio, author 1921. 21. Albert Jolik, local historian, redactor 1921. Haften Arneberg, folkart historian 1921. Gerhard Gran, literature historian 1920. Just Kuvigstad, Samlet Samisk Sprak and Folkeman 1920. 1920. Appointed 1876-1919. Anton Ora, bibliographer 1919. Olaf Kolsrud, church historian 1919. Thomas Parr, psychology 1919. Hans Reynolds, journalist, writer 1919. Tav Flatten, local historian and folklorist 1918. Thomas Jorg Munster, entomologue 1918. G. O. Sars, Hefforsker 1918. Alais Gilrud, dialect researcher 1918. Richard Eriksson, philosopher 1917. John Laberg, local historian 1917. Edvard Langset, folklorist 1917. Anders Numedal, archaeologue 1917. Olaf Olafsson, theologian, culture historian 1917. Georgian Riatin, teacher, dialect researcher 1917. Ole Knutsen Odgaard, mayor, local historian 1917. Thorstein Hoverstad, historian 1916. Alexander Bug, historian 1914. Adolf Fanon, historian of medicine, orientalist 1914. Thorleif Hannaas, philologist, professor 1914. Eugen Jorgensen, botanist 1914. Torkel Molland, folklorist 1914. Eric Vullum, journalist, public speaker 1914. Roald Amundsen, Paul Ferrer, Som Nationalgave 1913. Christian Birch Reichenwald Ars, philosopher 1913. Christian Osberg, jurist and folklorist 1912. Lawrence Berg, folklorist 1911. Jacob Alland, local historian 1911. Ivar Kleven, folklorist, local historian 1909. Johan Mayer, folkart historian 1909. Steinar Schott, ordnekred actor 1909. Sigurd Engbu, astronomer 1908. Thorbjorn Frolich, theologian, samfunnsøkonom 1908. Andreas Hansen, geolog and ethnograph 1908. Georg Riesk, componist, music historian 1908. Soren Anton Sorensen, historian 1908. Amund B. Larsen, dialect forsker 1901. Catharinus Elling, folkemusiksamler 1899. Olav Sand, folkemusiksamler 1899. Ole Andreas Overland, historian 1898. Johannes Skar, folklorist 1897. Andreas Aubert, art historian 1895. Georgian Alexander Knudson, Assyriologist 1894. Wilhelmine Brandt, genealogist 1893. Johannes Belsheim, theologian 1880. Hans Ross, lexicographer 1877. Johannes M. Norman Forrester, botanist 1876. References